was just gonna go into the stewed. Oh, the door is locked. I can't open it. Well, let me see. There's 3 lights on the door, and there's these cylinders on the ground with 3 symbols on it. And there's a picture of a whale, a picture of a torch, and a picture of a sun. Wait, so maybe if I rotate this one dial over.
Bong! Do you want a game hint?
Yes, I do. I really want a game hint.
Look at the cylinders.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to twist this one to counterclockwise, and then this one to the right. And I can open the door now.
Dong! Remember, the triangle button makes you climb.
Welcome to the State of the Franchise, where we look at franchises of all shapes and sizes. My name is Fred Dake, and I'm here with my co-host, Tom Stadler. Tom, how you feeling?
Fred, I'm feeling great today. I am excited to talk about this week's topic. We're in a new year, so, it's the new year, new pod, and things are feeling fresh.
It's fresh, but we're kind of up to our same old shit because we got a great guest returning from our early days here.
Dan Pappas.
Hello. It's nice to be back. Thanks for trusting my opinion on things enough to let me do this again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dan, we had such a good time with you last time. You were an absolute encyclopedia on a very similar type of game, which I think we'll have to talk about because, of course, this week's topic is the popular video game series Uncharted, which was made by the publisher Naughty Dog, a kind of a Indiana Jones feeling story. But Dan, we did notice the similarities that Naughty Dog was also the publisher on Crash Bandicoot, your last episode.
Naughty Dog is an overall underrated, slept-on studio. I shouldn't say that. Like, everyone knows those games now. Everyone knows the Uncharted games and The Last of Us. But coming from the early days, it's like, how could the studio that developed, Crash Bandicoot, or I think I know we talked about it, like the Sonic's ass game, or as they called it, because in development, because you're just looking at the back of Sonic instead to an extent. How could they turn around and develop this blockbuster movie of a video game franchise and then do it twice with 2 different ideas? It's incredible. Naughty Dog is such an amazing creative studio in that regard, just the idea output.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's pretty incredible when you guys think about where they started with, Crash Bandicoot, very cartoony, like we are trying to do Sonic, and then, to move into the types of video games that are as emotionally invested people can get into them, and the action that comes with them, and the gameplay is so fun. I don't know. And Fred, am I remembering that you said that you had somebody watching you play Uncharted and they thought it was a movie?
No. That was a commercial. Well, this actually did happen for a second today, or it was yesterday. I was playing the game, and my wife did say, "What are we watching?" But it was like, it wasn't quite the same where she wasn't really taking it in. Like, the commercial was like, your girlfriend's gonna be so stupid, she's not even gonna know you're gaming. She's gonna think she's watching a movie. Like, that was the vibe of the commercial. But it did, because they have these cinematic scenes. For a second, she looked up from her phone and was like, "Oh, what are we watching?" And was like, "No, we're playing."
We are in the game mode.
I forgot about those commercials. They're not entirely inaccurate. Obviously, it was played up, but I did forget about those commercials.
Well, I think it's no surprise that Gamergate came about years later, right? And just the whole idea of, we don't really consider women in, our target audience, and it's but they like video games too, just as much as guys do. And
yeah, if you want to really see the temperature of the time, just watch a Taco Bell commercial or a video game console commercial at the time. You'll really see how the culture was then.
Yeah. Well, avoid the old PlayStation 3 commercials. They're just like nightmare, fuel.
Oh,
do you remember
the baby?
Those?
Yeah.
The baby, and it was just the console in the center of a white room and just black ooze everywhere, and it was just that was a trip and a choice.
Yeah, it was just a lot. It was a lot. So, for anyone who is unfamiliar with Uncharted, I kind of mentioned it is sort of Indiana Jones in terms of story. But if you don't even know what Indiana Jones is, so this is an action-adventure video game franchise following a character named Nathan Drake, who is a treasure hunter. So he's like going and looking for like old lost treasures in the world. I mean, you've heard stories like this 100 times, I'm sure, even just through osmosis of pop culture. And there are 4 different installments of the main series following Nathan Drake as he's going to look for these treasures, and he has to like kind of outwit and outshoot the enemies. He has to shoot a lot of enemies.
He's a bit of a scallywag, I would say.
Yeah, he is a world-class acrobat. It's pretty incredible. But I guess where I really wanted to go though first here, guys, and maybe we'll start with you, Dan, as you are our esteemed guest. So what are kind of your earliest memories of Uncharted? Like, where did you first start playing it?
Yeah. So I do have a very, very specific memory of seeing so this was right at it wasn't exactly a launch title on the PS3, but it was pretty early on the PlayStation 3. And I remember seeing a commercial for it and being blown away by this commercial for the game because it was gameplay footage. And it was unlike anything I had ever seen. Like, it looked unbelievable at the time. And I think it was like 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And I think, I got a PlayStation 3 earlier that year. And, maybe it was 2007 when it actually finally came out.
Yeah, 2007.
Okay. But I remember seeing this and like for the first time with having a digital store on PlayStation, I was able to download a demo of that game.
Oh yeah.
And I played through the demo, which was like chapter 4, if I'm remembering, because they break down the parts of the games as chapters.
Yep.
And chapter 4 in Uncharted 1 is when the plane that Drake and Sully are in gets shot down, and Sully and Drake get separated, and Drake's parachute doesn't open properly, and he wakes up on like attached to that statue, and like wakes up, shakes, and is like, oh shit, because there's just like a big statue, and the statue's holding a sword, and it's like right in his face when he finally comes to. And that moment, like, and you do a whole bunch in there, and you get to explore a little bit of the forest. You do several shootouts and all sorts of stuff all throughout it. But I think on my like 4th or 5th time playing through this demo, my mom finally watched, and I didn't skip the cutscenes at all with it. And so hearing, it opens up with Drake just going, oh shit, and my mom got so mad.
No,
because 2007, I must have only been like 13 tops.
Oh wow,
is that right? Yeah, like right when that was happening, it was like 12 or 13, and I was terrified that they were not going to let me get that game.
Oh no.
And so that was my first real exposure to it, was playing that demo dozens of times before I finally got the actual game. And fortunately, they did still let me get it, because after that, Mom just saw me running around and just doming people with my handguns and stuff. And
I'm sure that made her feel a lot better.
Oh yeah,
too,
yeah. Well, then it was then it was fine. But that was my first exposure to it, and I just remember being, when I saw her reaction to Drake swearing.
It's like, what is this? You're watching or playing?
Yeah, exactly.
No, Mom, you're dumb. This is not a movie. This is a video game.
You don't understand. It's cool.
I just know, like, at that time, the PS3 and the Xbox 360, the live stores where you could download demos, I got so much mileage out of, like, just playing demos.
Oh, I bet.
Just like you said, playing that chapter over and over again. I can't even think of how many demos that, like, because you could just have them on your Xbox and not have any games. And, like, that was, like, the early, like, hard drive that we have on our systems now. It's just like I was, if I went somewhere with my Xbox, I'm like, oh, I got my demos. I can play those.
Yeah. That was with the PlayStation 1, too. They had the demo disc that would come with it when you bought it. And I just remember wearing that thing out and playing the same, like, first levels or, like, couple matches of a fighting game over and over again.
I do specifically remember doing that first chunk of Metal Gear Solid on a demo disc.
Because you get the magazine, I remember, with the demo disc in it, and it had a couple of demos on it for games, right?
Yeah, it was usually like 3 or 4, sometimes more.
Yeah, I think I even got like a 6-month subscription to like Game Informer or something like that. And,
ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were the days.
Those were the days. Fred, what about you? What was some of your earliest exposures to Uncharted, whether playing or watching it?
It was definitely the ads, and because for a while that was the title they were pairing with the systems, I believe. Like that was the bundle. If you were gonna get a PlayStation 3, even to the PlayStation 4, I think Uncharted 4 was like part of the bundle. That was kind of their big. It's not a game for everyone. Like you said, there's a lot of shooting in it, but there isn't really like blood and guts in it. So it's a teen game, so they can get away with bundling it. Although I thought it was kind of cool nowadays, like just not Thor Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is the bundle now. It's like, we're just putting a mature game in there. We don't care anymore. But our earliest actually playing was when the PlayStation Store started giving the free games every month.
Yeah.
The earliest one was the 4th one, and the most time I spent with it was actually the multiplayer, because the multiplayer, which we can get into later, was, I don't know if you ever played, is it Factions for Last of Us? Mm-hmm. It was that, but plussed up, where it's, 5-on-5 or 6-on-6, and you're running at each other, shooting, but you also have your grappling hook, so you're swinging around. Like, it's a very fun, less, like, intense, less than Call of Duty. It's not like that. It's more just fun. Mm-hmm. I spent hours on that. And then I played the story a little bit, but not until very recently have I, like, sat down and locked into it, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Like, the first ones, the earlier games I'm enjoying going back. They're a little older because I didn't experience them when they came out.
Yeah.
But they are more like almost arcadey in a good way. Like there's puzzle stuff, but like you said, there's a lot more just like you can just get headshots on guys running around. It's definitely a more simple play that's fun. Like that's like I went back and played the first God of War, and that's like that. It's very slice and dice, where this is like a lot of shooting with some puzzles.
Yeah. Now you're talking about God of War, like the very first one, or you're talking about like God of War first in the Norse mythology?
No, the first one.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I've been going back because, PlayStation Plus has all those classic catalog games, and I'm just like, when I don't know what I want to play, I throw those on.
Yeah.
Because you can just stream them. So Uncharted is very new for me, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. It's definitely something that resonates now, I feel like, even after its life, which is good. I feel like the Last of Us games also, like we talked about, Naughty Dog, had that kind of lasting impact to the point where they're like remaking the first one or like remastering the first one. And I think I was a little confused, like, why did we need a part 1? But I mean, I heard it's beautiful, like it looks great, plays great, and it's like, yeah, I mean, as long as these games are around, people are going to keep coming back to them and keep finding them for the first time and enjoying them. And that's kind of how I got into Uncharted myself. I'd always known about it, and people talked about how great of games they were. I remember the commercials as you guys are talking about. I'm like, yep, okay. Mm-hmm. But I always was like, nah, I don't have a PlayStation 3. I'm not going to go for it. Yeah, I thought I was done after PlayStation 2 with PlayStations, and then 4 came around, and I'm like, I'm back in. And yeah, one of like the first things that I noticed was like, I think it was either the PS4 or PS5 collection or something like that it had Uncharted 4, and I was unemployed in like 2019, I think. Like I had just lost my job, and I was like, well, got nothing else to do, so I downloaded the Uncharted pack. Was like on sale, like 1 through 3, and so I just played through all of those in like a 3-week span, like 1 through 4, and I loved it. But I definitely noticed, like, the age of the first one, you're like, okay, this one's a little older, and then as you kept going, you're like, oh wow, holy cow, this guy, like, awesome.
Yeah, like I noticed 3 is already trying to be 4, and like I mean that in a good way. Like it's reaching for the type of cinematic game that we're used to.
Right.
I think that's pretty cool.
It was trying to take the platform to its like furthest limits, right? And then 4, I think, finally realized what it could do. But yeah, we've definitely been out of the loop here for a bit now. The last time, to even break down some of the history here, the first Uncharted, as Dan mentioned, came out in 2007. And then the most recent game, which was after the year after 4 came out, 4 came out in 2016. Then they had an additional chapter that did not star Nathan Drake called Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which came out in 2017. So we are now going on 6 years with no Uncharted games in the mainstream, and so far very scant rumors about any new ones.
They put a really nice bow on Nathan Drake's story at the end of 4 that I don't know if there needs to be more. I would be okay seeing additional spin-off things with the characters like Chloe, Chloe Fraser, who is your partner for a good chunk of 2, I wouldn't mind seeing more of her. She was a lot of like that game, The Lost Legacy, was a lot of fun, and it was good to kind of get back to form and go on an adventure. And the style of adventure was still just as fun without, Nathan Drake being the person.
Sure.
So I would want to see it continue with familiar characters. I wouldn't want to see a whole reboot with brand new people that I don't want to say care about, because that sounds harsh.
Yeah.
But they did such a good job with the world building with our cast and crew of treasure hunters. And yeah, you meet new people throughout the games as it goes, but there were those staple folks. And so if they wanted to make another one, again, focusing as Chloe and going on an adventure as Chloe, I'd be all for that. But I don't think I really don't see a shot of us returning back to another Nathan Drake adventure.
You say that now, though. But
I'm not saying I wouldn't be mad if it happened. I don't know if it's necessary.
What about a prequel, like a Baby Sully?
I mean, I like a younger Sully going on an adventure as Sully. I think that would be pretty
You'd
neat.
be like, "How you doing? I'm Sully.
I'm Mark Wahlberg.
You guys doing good? You want to look for some treasure?
You wanna go to they got a fucking TV in the break room.
Yeah, what am I doing in Papa John's here? What's going on?
Yeah, I want to figure out how he became a grizzled, like, cigar chomping guy. That's the story I want to be told in the PlayStation format.
You want the solo version of of like Sully's story with like what was the guy who plays Han Solo, young Han Solo?
Alden Ehrenreich?
Yeah. Just trying to do his best to do like, oh, this is how he got the cigar and the mustache.
Yeah, that's...
But it's funny too though, because you say, is it necessary? Was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull necessary? Is Dial of Destiny even necessary?
Well, that would be my card on the table. Is I'd rather just have an Indiana Jones game instead of an Uncharted game.
Right. And just kind of do something different, which would be great if Naughty Dog did it. But let's start at the beginning though, to even just get into the beginning of Nathan Drake's story. So Naughty Dog, as we talked about, had done the Crash Bandicoot games, and then they also went and did these Jak and Daxter games. And after completing Jak 3, Naughty Dog kind of assembled their whole like most technically talented staff members and began development on this new project, which was codenamed Big, which was actually Uncharted 1, Drake's Fortune. So they started beginning development in 2005. And so we saw them kind of, I guess, approach a different type of thing, because until then we can describe a lot of their games as cartoony, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, they were very blocky characters with like kind of weird proportions. So now they were actually going after like human looking characters, and probably, I mean, maybe fairly say, sort of started setting the standard in video games of what a human character should and could look like, right?
There's definitely like a swashbuckly vibe in all the games. I feel Crash Bandicoot's got like this island vibe. I feel Jack and Dexter, they're kind of like a, I don't know, old school vibe like that.
Yeah.
And then Uncharted is definitely that.
Absolutely.
So I feel that's kind of like the through line I see.
It's almost kind of a spiritual successor to like LucasArts, right? Or whatever they became when they were making games, right? But yeah, it's like, it kind of felt like they always were kind of like the first ones who did a lot of like these like kind of like feeling like adventurous type games, right? They had the point and click games, and it sort of felt like though once they tried to get out of that, they really never got out of that. They still have like branch off studios like Telltale that are doing point and click. But now with Naughty Dog, you have them doing, you know, we go from like this like animated, like you said, kind of like swashbuckling feeling to, all right, how do we ground that a little bit? And so we got into Drake's Fortune, and it's one of the first games to use force feedback vibration, which is weird, right? Like,
What's force feedback vibration?
Yeah, so it was, I guess the best way to describe it is you had, like, the controller would vibrate more. Like, a lot of times in other games with the DualShock and all of that, it was as you were doing something specifically, as you were pressing buttons or you were interacting, it would vibrate. This game, if you got hit, all of a sudden it's vibrating. Or if the game is trying to tell you something, it's vibrating a little bit more and giving you that haptic feedback in your hands to let you know that you're on the right track, or hey, you're being shot. Get to cover. There's other very obvious signs of that too, but it just helped create a more immersive experience that when you're playing that game, you are drawn in, because not only are you like watching and hearing, now you're also feeling, the actions, and it's a lot more consistent as you're moving and all that stuff. So
yeah, that definitely tracks, because I do feel like, yeah, you didn't have that much. Like, I'm even thinking back to like when you get the rumble pack for like Star Fox, right? And it's like, oh yeah, whenever you get hit, like you give the rumble, but it's like, it's literally when those things are like interacting with you. Whereas like, yeah, this took it to the next level.
Yes, it was that first next level, and now every game that you play with a controller today has that level of feedback, and sometimes, you feel a slight little thump as you are just walking in some games, and like it reacts and you feel it in your hands, and that just helps further bring the player into the world of the game and feel immersed.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we get a little bit of that feature in this game. It's got this third-person perspective, which had really taken off through Metal Gear Solid, even years before that, and all the way through, like GoldenEye, which I think, well, that's more first-person, but I think Resident Evil also kind of popularized the over-the-shoulder look, too. That's the one I always think of with it. And after some delays, kept pushing this game back, finally the thing came together, which tells the story of Nathan Drake, who is this treasure hunter, supposedly a descendant of Sir Francis Drake, although the series kind of puts that in question, whether that's true or not, searching for the lost treasure of El Dorado, and finds Sir Francis Drake's diary, and he travels with his friend Sully, as Dan explained, who is a naval pilot, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a jack of all trades. You learn a little bit more about him in Uncharted 3, where you get to flashback to some of early or young Drake's first encounters with him, that he's kind of a con man who's good at a lot of different things and talking himself out of a lot of sticky situations, and he's made a lot of money. He's rich.
Yeah.
There's and that's just kind of,
He owns a successful burger company with his brothers.
We will get into the movie at some point. We will get into I think we cannot finish this episode without talking about. I think everybody has thoughts on Mark Wahlberg playing Sully. It's a choice, but We'll definitely dive into that before this episode's out. You can keep dropping your Wahlburgers.
You know I'm going to keep doing it, but I'll apologize every time, so it's okay.
So they're looking for the lost city of El Dorado, and what we find, and not to spoil the game, but...
No, we're going to spoil everything. I mean, that's the point.
So spoiler alert, if you have not finished these games, this is sort of a point where we're going to dive in. I mean, really, go and play the games and then come back, listen to the episode if you really want to experience it firsthand. But El Dorado is not a city, but as I mentioned, the lost treasure. It's a statue. And it's a statue that does some weird things.
Well, it's not necessarily. It's more of a coffin than a statue.
Yeah, and it creates zombies.
So it was cursed is essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And you made a comment before we started recording about not liking some elements of it because it gets a little like up until in most of these games up until a certain point in the game everything is so grounded in reality.
Yeah,
it is all plausible, and then it takes a slight little turn for the supernatural. Which I kind of like. I remember being like the first time playing through the full game of Uncharted 1 when you're in that Nazi bunker and you just have your flashlight and the creatures are charging you in the hallways, or as you're waiting for doors to unlock and you're screaming as you're running around in circles in a larger room, just running and gunning and shooting these things as they are coming at you because you can't stand still, you'll get mauled. I remember being terrified of those, and it was such a and it adds to the why on earth would this have not been recovered by this point in time? It's everyone who tried opened the thing, got turned into these zombies or were cursed into whatever this form is, and so the statue remained, and that's it's interesting and cool, and I can see why people wouldn't like it because again that happens at like chapter 18 of 21 in that game, and so you're at you're in the last 10% of that game basically, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, here's none of the Nazis died. They all turned into these Nosferatu things, and they're coming to get you. But I don't know. I enjoyed the supernatural twists because that changed the scale of the adventure to me. Like it made it from like a really cool archaeological exploration game where you shoot people to this grand adventure where now it changes what Drake needs to do. Because now he realizes this cannot get out. This cannot leave. We have to do something about this, and that dramatically changes things
for sure.
Well, I feel like that's just like the Indiana Jones thing. Isn't that how every Indiana Jones movie goes? It's like pretty legit up until a point, and then it gets bug nuts.
And then you open the Ark of the Covenant, and the Nazis' faces melt. Noticing a trend.
Yes. So, I do want to kind of put a pin in this because I would like to dive into all that deeper. In fact, talking about how it's a defensible choice based on the treasure hunting movies and things and properties we've seen up until now. It's not unusual. You can even go back to like Egypt to talk about the Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, right? Where it's like people who found Tutankhamun experienced weird events after that. So, but for now, so that is the big plot twist. Failed to mention that Nate also has another partner, Elena Fisher, who is her production company has kind of funded this expedition to help find this treasure. So she is also involved with it. Some tantalizing romantic feelings arising there.
You should see Tom's fingers in the studio when he's doing this. He's doing he's tickling the ivories that are non-existent, but I love it.
This is how I got my soon-to-be wife.
I don't know if that's true.
You can ask her yourself if you like. But So they're competing against Gabriel Roman, who is a competing archaeologist, similar to what's his nuts in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Great bad guy name.
God, I know.
Gabriel Roman.
It's just like it's a very memorable everything they got.
Well, and his the lead of his Guns for Hire Navarro is just incredible. So you got Roman and Navarro as your antagonists, in that game, and it's just Navarro's insane, and Roman is just so conniving and this just sharp dressed, much more well funded, businessman. Essentially, who's like, no, I want this. This is mine, and they keep getting in your way, and you somehow keep narrowly avoiding getting shot in the head, and being able to go on this adventure. But no, Gabriel Roman is I think he's a really cool villain.
Yes. He definitely has enough of the mustache twirling that you like to see in like your villains in video games and movies or whatever else. And I mean, I think something we've already kind of touched on. There's as much as like the commercials were kind of making fun of like people being like, oh, they're gonna think it's a movie. I mean, does feel like a movie. It feels like you're interacting in a movie that you're watching, right? And like, I think video games up until then, yes, started playing with that idea, but this is the first one I think maybe along those lines that really was like, you are not just pointing and clicking. You are actually doing the actions, following what feels like almost like a feature-length film, or like a season of TV, right? It's like however many hours, 20 hours, 30 hours. So the game comes out then in 2007. It gets a lot of critical praise for what it's done. Because it's really game changing. I think if you go back to it now, you'll find maybe it's a little bit clunkier than, well, especially compared to successors. But I mean, I certainly enjoyed the first game. I don't know that I would ever rank it among my favorite, but we'll get into that later too. But I don't know. I guess what were some of your guys' thoughts just on game one here as we kind of put a pin in that?
It was an absolutely fantastic way to break the mold of what a lot of games were. Yeah, I think that the gameplay is a little clunky at times. Yeah, there are some, especially when it comes to like the climbing, puzzling sections. The cover system and the shooting, that's felt really consistent throughout all of the games. Yeah, they've changed a few things, added some better, slightly better mechanics, but that's all felt the same. The things that they really improved on over the course of the series were a lot of just the mobility options. I felt like overall it was a really consistent overall gameplay experience between the four, where they just elaborate on it and like tighten the screws a little bit as it goes on. So I don't think it's horribly clunky. There are definitely things that are like, oh, if I went and sat down and replayed the whole thing today, I would get to a spot and I'm like, oh yeah, this. Where it's just, mechanically it's not as clean as it could be. But this game, I have probably played through and beaten Uncharted 10 times.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. It's so good. The extras for, when you beat it the first time, and, you can play through it again on, one of the harder difficulties. I beat all 4 of the games on the crushing difficulty. But the one thing that I haven't done specifically is gone through, and I know on like one of the more recent re-releases, I think in the Drake's collection or whatever they called it, where they re-released 1, 2, and 3 in one game.
Yeah.
They added an even harder difficulty level called Brutal.
Right.
I think I saw that and just ignored that.
With how hard Crushing was, well, and Crushing's really hard when you're getting started with it. Mm-hmm. As you start getting through the game, you get used to what that feels like, and it makes a huge difference. But I remember Brutal being like, oh, you did like almost everything, like 1 or 2 shots you, and it's like, oh, so it's real. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to tell me that this guy can't take 40 bullets, and then just sort of sit around for a little bit and be like, okay, I'm good now. But overall, it was one of my favorite games for a very very long time, and I still hold it in high regard because it just changed the way I felt and feel about games.
Yeah, it definitely had I don't know. It really, like you said, kind of elevated things to a whole new level. And yeah, I mean, it really is a marvel for its time, and it created something that has now been lasting forever. I don't know, Fred, what your feelings were on this a little bit.
Yeah, I was very much enjoying one. I think the thing that I enjoyed most about playing one was beating your guys' high scores on headshots, kills in a row. Every time I did it, just your name popped up and it just said my username, your username. I had more points. I think that was really nice.
Well, you realize I'm going to go back in. and
He's going to play through it for, what is it now, the 11th, 12th?
Maybe more.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. So, after this game came out, I mean, a lot of people talked about it. I definitely remember that. I mean, I enjoyed the first game quite a bit, but I think, I was ready, like, okay, what's 2 like? And I do need to talk about, because we didn't really get into the developers, and I think it's actually the right time to do this, because the first game was directed by Amy Hennig, who is, anybody who follows the video game industry, is kind of like a very notable name. She is a person who has driven a lot of this stuff forward. She was the director on the first game, with her writer Neil Druckmann, who is also now
who's this guy?
Was a now driving force not only in Uncharted but also The Last of Us, as he became the director of that game, or the creative director on that game. So but then they got added in with 2 other very major people in the process, and one was Josh Scherer, who was another writer and was involved in the rest of the games from there on out, as well as Bruce Straley, who was a co-director on the second one, because pretty much Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, was pushed into development pretty much immediately following the success of the first game. And they had kind of drew from this whole inspiration. They were trying to figure out what the next story was going to be, and they started looking at a lot of different types of journals and entries and like histories for all these famous explorers. And Marco Polo, who is also somebody that we enjoy playing a swimming pool game. I just had to squeeze that.
I like it.
Gotta make sure you guys are
known
awake.
for his famous swimming game.
There is an achievement in Uncharted 2 that at one point you are, at the top of a hotel, and there is a pool, and you can hop in the pool, and Drake does start saying Marco, and Chloe yells at him and says, "I'm not playing this with you," or something like that, and you get an achievement for playing Marco Polo. And I believe that has been in every game since then, that they have an achievement for jumping in a body of water that it's like, why are you doing this? We don't have time to play Marco Polo. So that's just been a running gag in the rest of the games from there.
I think I've hidden it once, but I'm like, because that sounded so familiar when you said it.
Yeah, it's... I think there are a lot of those things in there. It actually makes me think of the recent like God of War Ragnarok and how everybody comments, like everybody in your party comments whenever you go to look for loot. And it just was like it was making me.
My dad likes doing that. My dad likes loot.
And it's like I just love that people are impatient. Just like, do you really have time right now to be going and doing this?
The worst was I loved playing the Harry Potter games, and in the third one, it was kind of a cool setup where you were playing as the 3 mains, but you could like switch out, so you'd be all running together, and each person had different spells they could use. But Ron, man, so annoying. I'm pretty sure they got Grint, because you can hear, when you hear Grint, you know Grint. And the whole time, we really need to get back to our dormitory. We've got potions class, Harry. Like, if you go just down the one wrong hallway, where are we going now? Like, it's the worst. We're gonna get in trouble.
It's such a great mechanic in games, though, to just almost keep you honest, though, a bit, right? Because it's almost like why are you going and doing this? And yeah, and in these games, I think I do remember falling in the pool. I didn't hear them be like, I'm not playing the stupid game. Because, like, yeah, why are you doing these random things? Or why are you looking? I mean, I remember trying to find some of the trophies in Uncharted, and I'm just like, nah, forget this. This is just going to be too much. If I see one, I'll grab it. But
I don't know if this is true, but I feel like that kind of thing started with like games like Gex. The Gecko game, because wouldn't he like talk to you like when you're just chilling, like what are you doing, Buttman? They couldn't use like bad words.
If you pressed the select button, you could force him to say one of his many catchphrases. I played. Oh man, I love those games.
it's funny you bring up Gex though too, because that was one of Bruce Straley's, who was the director of Uncharted 2, or co-director. I'm sorry. His first games he helped design. He did the Gex series, so that was kind of how he cut his teeth in the industry. And he also did like that X-Men video game that came out on like Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo that was real good. And the Jack and Daxter games, he was also an artist. So he was a co-art director on the first Uncharted game, but really got to get into the director's chair full time here, coming into 2.
I just gotta say real quick, I get confused Jack and Dexter and Ratchet and Clank.
Yes.
That's all I want to say about it.
Me too.
Fair. Wildly different, but also I kind of get it.
Yeah. It's probably worth talking about, though, that Amy Hennig also had a few games that she was involved with before she got into this series, too, where it's kind of Druckmann and Cher were sort of like dropped into Naughty Dog and kind of worked their way up from there. She was involved in like the Blood Omen series, like Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. So like
nice.
That was kind of where she got in, and then got to do her first director on a couple of those games, and then Jack 3 before getting to the director's chair for the first 3 Uncharted games. So you kind of got the dream team a little bit here of Naughty Dog working on this second one coming in here. And you know, they definitely worked on some new things. They were developing Naughty Engine 2.0, which was, I imagine, like the Unreal Engine of the time. But they were able to help increase, you know, more extensive motion capture, greater, you know, cinematic sequences. Everything was bigger, better. And then, as Fred mentioned, for the fourth one, online multiplayer came into play. So, as we talk about 2, the whole story is about them looking for the
Shangri-La.
Shangri-La, or some people might call it Shambhala. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Did you guys know this song?
No.
How does your light shine in the homes of Shambhala?
Ooh, that sounds nice.
Three Dog Night?
Yeah, I know it now.
Yeah, like that.
I know exactly one song by Three Dog Night, and it's about being lonely. Oh, they did that song too? Yeah. Okay, I know 2 songs. Because they also did the One is the Loneliest Number.
Oh, yeah.
We got to do our 3 Dog Night pod.
Clearly.
I saw them at Summerfest.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that was a good show. Oh, man. Three Dog Night has done quite a few hits, but I had to bring that up because that song was in my head the moment I realized this game was about them looking for Shangri-La. Or Shangri-La. Or like, or it's commonly known as Shambhala. Like, or it's like Shambhala, I think. There's like such a difference in the pronunciation of that. And I didn't realize it was supposed to be a place. Like, or I mean, this song obviously implies it's a place, but like, I didn't realize that like it was supposed to be a real place. I thought it was just sort of like, I don't know, something that they were like nicknaming. But so I mean, as we get into 2, you know, so they're looking for Shangri-La. So main characters are all back for this one. We have Nathan is back, and then as you mentioned, we have a new partner for him, Dan.
Yes.
Miss Chloe Fraser,
the Aussie.
She's kind of British though, just right in the movie.
Yeah, well, the movie depiction, that's different and it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters. It matters, but I mean, maybe she's British, maybe she's Australian. Minus a few things, those accents do sound somewhat similar in cadence. They are dramatically different, but I believe she's Australian.
I mean, I think
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't. It's just the fact that she's a brand new character for the game.
Does she ever throw a boomerang?
No, so then she's English. Good.
Yeah.
Good. I forgot about that. That's the one rule.
Unless you saw her put a shrimp on the Barbie either.
No, there was no shrimping in Uncharted 2, unfortunately.
Yeah.
A lot of great that they do, but at the same time, missed opportunities. There was no cookouts or grilling, anything like that. So there's no real way to know for sure.
Uncharted 5, the barbecue. That's what I want.
Yes, they go on an adventure in Arlen, Texas, to find the lost propane grill of Hank Hill.
Well, Nathan Drake, you came to the right place. I got propane and propane accessories. So, in this game, they're looking for Shambhala or Shangri-La, however you want to pronounce it. So he's hooked up with Chloe Fraser, just in the sense of partners, not. Although there is some potential romantic.
No, there
history.
100% is.
Yeah.
No, they are involved.
Well, treasure hunting it's got to make you so horny.
There's just that thrill, that excitement, the adrenaline just starts pumping. You're like, oh, I love this. So they're looking for Marco Polo's Lost Expedition, though, that was looking for this place. And they're competing against a guy named Harry Flynn in this one. So, spoiler alert, Gabriel Roman didn't make it.
Yes. And I believe Roman opens, going back to that, Roman is the one who opens the coffin, breathes in the zombie dust, starts turning immediately, and Navarro just domes him, just kills him immediately. And Navarro's the final fight. He also does not make it. And honestly, his death, way more awful than Roman's.
Yeah. He gets tied to the statue as
it drops into the ocean, and so he just gets dragged into the depths.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Well, something we should say about these games, I know we're deep in, but all of them start like almost media res, just like in it, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, is it this game that you start like with the train wreck?
Yes.
And you're climbing up? Yeah. And
Which is such a blockbuster movie way to get this thing going that you're like, oh my, you just wake up and you're like, we're on an exploded train. What is happening? And then it flashes back like 3 weeks and you're like, a lot has happened and we have to catch up to where we were. It was just such an amazing way. And it helps that seeing everything that Drake went through in the first game, you could set up an establishing shot like this. It wasn't unbelievable for this character to have found himself in that horrifying situation.
Right. And it's like, it just feels like that's something that continues to sort of follow. I mean, even the movie kind of starts like that with him like floating on the plane. And, you have to like kind of catch up to that point, same way you do in Uncharted 2. Like, how did we get to this train wreck? And obviously they're kind of like in Nepal at some point. I thought it was Tibet, but not right, obviously. But all the great things happen in Nepal. Raiders of the Lost Ark, also they had to go through Nepal. But they also went through the city of Kathmandu. So somebody obviously was a very big fan of classic rock, because I don't know if you guys know the song Kathmandu either. I think I'm going to Kathmandu. That's really where I'm going to.
I just have to say now that like whenever I listen to Spotify or I come across like a classic rock song, I now like message Tom like, hey, Boss Skaggs, Lido Shuffle. Good, right? And he's like, yeah. And I do that like a lot.
Yeah. That's Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band that sings Kathmandu.
Something tells me that Bob Seger was not an influence on the plot of this game, but I can't. I've never met Neil or Amy. I can't ask them.
What about that one song though?
So Amy, Neil, I'm talking directly to you now. Was Bob Seger the main influence for going to Kathmandu in Uncharted 2?
You have Kathmandu though and Shambhala. Like, right? It's like
It's got to be, right?
there's no, I guess. No, what is that song called though?
Treasure hunting in Memphis.
Yeah. Touchdown.
Wait, that's not even Bob Seger, is it?
No,
that's just like that one guy. He does that.
That's like a one-hit wonder, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, they end up finding Shangri-La, and we find that there are mutant people again in the end of this game. I mean, it's a long adventure that they're going through here. It's super exciting because they have obviously the train crash that we're talking about. What were some other big sequences in this game? Because it's so memorable.
So you do eventually meet up with Elena again in this game. About the halfway point, you meet up with her.
Yep.
Again, and I would say a really big sequence in this game is in that moment when Flynn betrays you. I wouldn't call him the main antagonist. The main antagonist is Zoran Lazarevic, and when he just shoots Jeff, the cameraman, in the head. He just executes him in front of Drake and Elena, and you then leading up to that moment, you're dragging Jeff through the street because he had been shot, and like there are military trucks coming at you, and you are just running through the streets, dragging this guy who can barely stand on his own to get him out of there and try to escape in this moment. Like that is such a big sequence.
Yeah.
Which is, incredible. But then I would also say kind of an equally big, obviously what leads up to the train crash in general, just the running up the train, moving car to car in constant shootouts, taking out a helicopter, which it's the helicopter then that crashes into the train when you finally take it down that causes the train to derail into the side of the mountain, which then gets you to where you're at in the game when you first started, and you wake up in this snow field hanging on in a train and all that. That's an unbelievably huge sequence. And then even at the tail end of the game when you beat Lazarevic and the mutant people, the defenders, the people of Shangri-La, they got their powers by consuming, because the Marco Polo's journal talks about this massive sapphire, and so they're like, it's got to be this huge, jewel, and it's got to be worth billions of dollars, and that's like part of it's like, do I want to know what happened to Marco Polo's lost fleet? Sure. Do I also want $1 billion for having the biggest sapphire in the world? Yes, of course. Turns out it's super powerful tree resin. It's just sort of a magical just chunk of resin at the base of this tree, and the native folks of Shangri-La,
whatever you want to call
it, ate that and basically became immortal as far as like a life expectancy is concerned. But they also turned blue.
Well, they even refer to the tree as the tree of life in the game, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you might be able to tree of life, or maybe you could look at it as, I think it's blending a few things, maybe Fountain of Youth, yeah. Tree of Life. And so, after you defeat Lazarevic, which, I do find it interesting that more often than not, and I'm just trying to think of all of them, the villains end up killing themselves or getting themselves killed, and Drake never really lands the final blow. He gets it to a point where, in like we said in Uncharted 1, Roman gets killed by his partner, and then the helicopter that falls off the cargo ship wraps a cord around Navarro's foot and just rips him down into the ocean. Lazarevic slips, and then a whole bunch he just basically gets ripped apart by a bunch of the native folks of the defenders of Shangri-La. But everything starts falling apart in Shangri-La, and you need to get the hell out of there.
Well, yeah, because you're blowing up the tree as you're fighting Lazarevic.
And it everything goes to the point where no one would ever be able to get back there.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of a running theme that it's like, oh, we find this thing, it's this mythical treasure, but we're going to be rich. Oh no, if this is unleashed on the world, everyone dies. And so we got to figure out how to stop this thing. Did we start it by finding the clues and putting it together? Sure. But now it's our job to stop it. But that's a huge sequence as well. So those are probably the three biggest like movie sequences that it's like, oh my, running through those crowded streets.
Yeah.
That was probably in Kathmandu, or was that in Yemen? Like the street shootout where they're running away with Jeff, the cameraman. That's a huge sequence.
Like
the train
following,
thing.
like him waking up after the train, right?
Well, no, that waking up after the train, you're kind of getting to the
Like the mountain peak, right? Yeah.
the mountain peak, and you're kind of getting to that end game. This is all leading up to the whole train sequence.
Right. Okay.
But
yep, I got you now. So it's definitely, it's an exciting game. And I think there's something to be said, too, about some of these treasure hunting stories that I kind of want to take a step back from. And you kind of just touched on it, and we've seen this now in the first two games, but it's going to be a running theme through the rest of the two, or the other games that talk about. It's never really about the final treasure in these stories, right? They're just the MacGuffin. It's really about the journey. And I think we see that in like every movie, story, book, whatever. Whether you can go back to Treasure Island, to National Treasure, to Indiana Jones, to whatever else, Goonies, right?
Well, I will say National Treasure, there was a treasure at the end of it. It was about the treasure.
I mean, yes, but you remember more about their journey, though, right? And then it's never, the treasure's never really like as it seems all the time, right?
Yes.
Or if there is a treasure, right, it's not always within reach, and rarely do they come away with the treasure itself. They just sort of find it, and they're like, yeah, it was there for a reason. Like, it was lost in all this. And it's just a very interesting thing that these stories, and I think it's even kind of like a commentary on the boss battles, too, which we'll talk about the next two games, too, because I do like the last boss battle in 4, but they're kind of anticlimactic a little bit.
But I don't hate it.
Yeah. But it's also not like the highlight. Like, I remember the fight with Lazarevich, but I don't.
Lazarevich's fight was really hard.
It is a tough one.
Like,
And
Navarro was fine because you just fight your way up the ship and then you get to him.
Yeah.
And then you got to just time your rolls in between some boxes and shoot him once, and then it's over.
Yeah, but I feel like, it's almost more annoying than it is. like, oh, this is the greatest thing. Like, I think, and perhaps, we can keep talking about this as it goes along. I feel like the lasting legacy of these games, though, is all the things that happen along the way. The train, the falling out of the plane, the, fighting these, like, monsters in the basement of a Nazi facility, right? Like, or a
in the middle of a jungle on an uncharted island.
Yeah. And it's just very, it very much kind of makes you reflect on a lot of the stories we know and why Uncharted is such a worthy successor to these things so far. I don't know. Any other thoughts, though, on 2? Fred, anything you want to share? How far did you get into it?
Not far. Like, just like a chapter or 2. Like, I literally just got a taste of 2 and 3.
It is absolutely worth going back to. 2 is my number 1 of the 4.
Gotcha.
By far, it is just so good. It is memorable. It is a popcorn flick in in video game form. I've probably played through and beaten that one just as many times as the first. It's just so good. Uncharted 2 is just so good.
Yeah, I think if we wanted to even earmark it, right, like Uncharted 1 felt like it was the first time like games really took another big step as far as like the industry goes, and Uncharted kind of made its mark. But as far as the franchise itself goes, I think 2 made it like, this is not just a landmark game. Now it's like, oh, this is a really good franchise. Like the second one did everything better than the first, as far as story,
Everything.
as far as gameplay, as far as graphics, you name it.
Everything is better in 2 than it was in 1.
Yeah. And I think once you have the baseline, you start to really care about these characters. You get into their history. And so naturally then, after that game came out in 2009, to great praise from everyone, and everyone saying, yes, much better than the first one. This is now the next great franchise. 3 got greenlit, which was being named Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. So, which is set a year later, but started development in the year 2010. So Naughty Dog, as we kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit as we talked beforehand, ended up splitting into 2 teams to chase down a little project they were working on beside Uncharted 3 called The Last of Us. And
sounds like it's terrible and will never take off, and there won't be 2 games and an HBO developed TV series about it. I remember saying that. A friend asked me about it, like, did you hear about this game? It was back in 2013, and he was like, yeah, this is coming out. I was like, sounds terrible. There's probably never going to be a sequel that comes out 7 years later, and it's not going to be developed into a TV show. It'll never happen.
And lo and behold.
And boy, do I have egg on my face.
Well, certainly I think the thing that kind of made a lasting impression for both of these franchises is the fact that Uncharted 3 kept Amy Hennig. She stayed in the director's chair for that one. Meanwhile, Bruce Straley and Noah Druckmann. Noah, right?
Neil,
I'm sorry. Why did I say Noah? Too many N names in this podcast. But they went off and did The Last of Us while she stayed and did Uncharted 3, sharing the director's chair with a guy named Justin Richmond this time. So kind of the dream team had to split up a little bit. And I don't know that... we'll kind of get into this. I think it's a good chance to talk, though, about how the legacy of Naughty Dog really kind of both split and grew because they had these great creatives that started taking on 2 different projects. Because 3 is a good game. I think it gets a lot more guff than it deserves.
I would say you're right, but how do you follow up something like Uncharted 2?
Correct.
Like, that is they did such an unbelievably amazing job with 2 that I think no matter what you do, there was going to be some frustration with whatever 3 turns out to be, because it's not 2. I still enjoyed it. I'm admittedly a little less familiar with all of the story beats. In this one, I know it's the Atlantis of the Sands, and it's desert themed instead of snowy mountain, and our main villain is just your average British citizen. No, but Marlo is honestly, she just looks like Dame Judi Dench a little bit, and it just carries herself in typical British supervillain way.
Yes.
But I don't mean that in a bad way, in a bad way at all.
Yeah. I think one thing that this game really tried to do, and kind of talk about it in the development process, is they really were trying to work on updating the visuals. I mean, they really pushed it to the edge, but I think they were stretching what the PS3 could do at this point. Mm-hmm. They wanted to make everything a little bit brighter, a little more well-rounded, a little more real. Continue to build on that multiplayer system with the co-op modes. And I think the one place it does kind of suffer, though, is the fact that it was just, you lost the people who wrote the last game. Like, Druckmann's gone, Straley's gone. You're losing, and same with Sure. And it's like, you've lost like 3/4 of the legs of what made the last game great to go and make a game that became an amazing game. And you can feel The Last of Us so much like reflects everything that Uncharted 2 did. Like, it felt like really that was almost the next step, whereas Uncharted 3 almost feels sort of like, it looks better, but it kind of feels like 2. Like,
and that's not a bad thing. Feeling like 2 is not a bad thing.
Right.
But at the same time, 1 and 2 felt so different from each other. They were wildly different adventures. Mm-hmm. 2 and 3, it's kind of the same adventure in a snow level or in an ice level. And the stakes were still really high going into this one, but I mean, it's less memorable to me. Just overall, it feels less memorable because of how good 2 is.
Yeah.
Like, 2 just eclipses everything else. And even still, like, I think I have a better... I just finished The Lost Legacy like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I probably have a better beat-for-beat memory of Uncharted 2 than I do of this game that I just finished. Because it's just that much more iconic to me.
Yeah, and I mean, so it's an interesting story because they are looking for like what's called like the Atlantis of the Sands. And this is the one where they're in Yemen. So
Okay, that's what I was.
So I mean, it starts with Nate and Sully meeting this like very British Talbot, and
yes.
who's trying to pull a fast one on him to buy Nate's ring. You know, which again I think is the first hint we really get that like Nate might not really be Drake, like, because he claims that like he inherited it, and then there's a lot of questions around that, and we end up getting into the history of like how Nate met Sully. So very reflective of some of that story we get in the movie, but it's more expanded how they meet in Spain, and Nate's trying to break into the museum and steal something, and Sully kind of sees him for the first time. He's like, "We're gonna do great things, kid," you know. That old crusty sailor feeling.
I have a feeling this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, there you go. But, you know, it's still an exciting game. Chloe Fraser comes back. We find Elena and Nate were married, but then estranged. And so they kind of like reconvene, and sort of there's a lot of this like weird tension between all of them. And yeah, it kind of goes along the whole place where they're going through like kind of the desert looking for these different things, kind of following the steps of the Crusaders. And kind of trying to get back to the start with like that whole thing of like, you know, Sir Francis Drake having this, and they go into the desert where it's sort of like he had been maybe like searching for this at one time, but then it kind of shifts away to a whole different expedition. But yeah, I'm even trying to like remember a little bit about this game because I remember there being some excitement. There's a lot of trippiness going on in this.
Yeah, that's the thing. You just get absolutely acid tripped out several times in this game, and that's just part of the part of the city, and you get drugged a couple of times, and you experience those things. You wake up in the middle of a desert at one point, drinking from this cursed tainted fountain as well. Like that's another thing in the supernatural element. There's literally an evil djinn imprisoned in this city, and it's a lot.
Yeah. We do get the cargo plane sequence, though, in this game, which we see in the Uncharted movie, where Nate is falling out of a plane, and he has to, like, grab onto a crate and, like, pull the parachute on the crate in order to, like, land safely because he doesn't have a parachute of his own. And he had fallen out of the back of this thing, and that's how he lands in the desert in Ubar, where he starts to go through these like little trippy sequences where he gets drugged out and he starts exploring his past, and we learn that from Marlowe, the villain, that he had adopted the name Drake while he's growing up in this orphanage, which is very funny because like I think in the movie they kind of gloss over that fact. Well, they do mention that it's like it might not be his name, but was that in the movie or is that in the games? You guys remember?
I think that's more so. I don't remember that being in the movie.
I don't think it is.
You don't have like a photographic memory of the Uncharted movie?
Do you?
No.
Oh.
Yeah. How far did you get in this game, Fred?
Third one?
Yeah.
Not very far. I'll say that. I was a little boy walking around a museum and looking at different artifacts, and that was about it. But like I said, I will be going back and playing these because I do find them enjoyable. I just think it's funny that I've played a bit of all four, and if you guys haven't told me, I would not have known that there's any supernatural stuff in it. Not that I care, like I said, go on and spoil, but I just think it's funny. Like, I literally have probably played up to right before it happens in the first one, and I've only done the second, third, and fourth up to like anywhere from 10 to 50%. So it's like, so I'm excited for that. You know, I'm excited to see some weird stuff.
No, I'm even trying to remember. I feel like there's less supernatural in 4.
There is, because there's kind of like this sinkhole in the middle of like the desert and like this lost city, and there's a lot of like hallucinogenic effects going on in this because Nate like kind of, I think he gets shot with another dart and he like envisions like Sully dying, and it's really just so that they give him the map, or that he would give the enemy the map or something like that to get to. It's like King Solomon's treasure, where he supposedly imprisoned this jinn in a vessel and cast it somewhere into the depths of the city. And so they were trying to find this, and I don't know that there really is anything.
The supernatural in Uncharted 3 is not real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real in that the water all has hallucinogenic effects, and so the city died out because people were drinking this tainted water and seeing things and killing each other. And so you fight Jinn, Djinn, Jinn, once you're actually in the city. You fight them and you can do that, but you find out after he sobers up, because you don't realize in that moment when they shoot Sully, you don't realize the player doesn't know that Drake has been poisoned again,
right,
or drugged again, and so as a player you think that happened, and so you also get very emotional in that moment, and I do remember that being very emotional in that moment and going through, and then all of a sudden there's genies that you are trying to kill because they are trying to kill you, and it's just you're going insane because of the drugs and the water in the actual city itself. And that was that's the supernatural element in 3, but that one's not real. The supernatural was a tangible thing in the first 2 games.
Yeah, right. So it's almost kind of like, they're looking for this, but they think there is treasure there, but really it's, or like this Jinn is there that's can like do all these things, but it turns out like, even like Sir Francis Drake like abandoned this mission. That's like the big reveal at some point. It's like they're following his tracks, and he's like, I never even like went and looked for this thing because this was a lost cause. Because it was. It turned out to be a dead city. I mean, the 2 villains then, I think Marlowe falls into a sinkhole and she sinks into the sand and drowns, and Talbot you shoot him and he falls off of into the sinkhole too, and so everybody just kind of dies in the desert here. It's sort of
and
like
then the city collapses again,
and then they never find it. But it turns out Sully was okay all along. Elena and Nate reconvene, or rekindle,
reunite.
And happily ever after for then. At that point, I think the problem with this game, maybe to what we were just talking about, it's almost hard to remember the story because there was all this hallucinogenic sequences that you're like, okay, I kind of remember that happening, but I also don't remember what the reality was. So it's hard to remember like beat for beat, this is what the story was. But it's still a fascinating game, and I remember a lot of people telling me like, oh, it's a disappointment, and I was like, it's fun, but if you're trying to compare it against 2, I think it just kind of falls a beat short.
Do you guys like the puzzles?
I love I shouldn't say I love them. I think there are some puzzles that are really good. It's fairly intuitive puzzling, as you are going about and doing things. But sometimes the puzzles are really tedious. And I feel like 2, 3, and 4 had more tedious puzzles than 1 did. Ones where it was just like kind of a little bit of a jump-in puzzle, and you did this, and it felt like something that you would have to do, and it made sense. But as you kind of go through the games, and the Lost Legacy, the one, the spin-off, oh boy, did it have some really obnoxious puzzles in it. A lot of the puzzles that were obnoxious were optional, and I didn't have to do them, but I did them, and it just sucked. So like I enjoy the critical thinking puzzle part of the gameplay, like especially once you get into these lost ruins and you're like, well, how, of course this door is closed, how can we, is there a way that we can get it open, or working with your environment to do that, or it's like, oh, there's this ancient like mechanism, and we do know to some extent that civilizations way before when these things would have been built were a lot more advanced than we thought they were, and that's just a fact. The Romans had concrete, and then they lost that secret for like 1,500 years or however the hell long it was in between the Roman Empire, and when we rediscovered reinforced concrete, and it's like, yeah, the people who were building these things. Does it seem impossible? Yes, of course. It's all carved directly into stone, but a lot of it is this like water-powered thing, and you're turning levers and cranks and stuff to make some of these things happen. And I think it's important for the world building. I think some of the puzzle sections go on a little bit too long. Same thing with the climbing sections.
You knew that was going to be my next question. How do y'all feel about climbing?
I mean, the Uncharted games are a climbing simulator with some gunplay, in the middle of them, because there is a ton of climbing. I think they do a good job of making it feel intuitive, and also the amount of climbing that you have to do, I think, really helps build the scale of what you're doing, and the scale of the environments and all of that. But there's a couple of places where you have to climb up and then you can fall down and then you have to climb back up and you have to do it a couple of times.
Yeah.
You're like, boy, this is getting a little old.
I do like it when you fall and someone's like, Nathan! No!
I enjoy the puzzling. It's excessive.
I bet you do.
It's excessive, but that's part of the stuff I always loved about the Goonies and about Indiana Jones. So I think when I got to do that, I'm kind of the other way around. I don't love the shooting. Like I think that's excessive in my repertoire. I get bored. I'm like, okay, great. He's a murderer. Like he is a mass murderer.
And the games are set up that you sometimes walk into an area and you go, yep, this is set up for a shootout.
Yeah, like an old West town, like Clint Eastwood. You're just like ready.
Yeah, I'll say, since I feel like we're kind of moving towards the fourth entry here, what I do like about the fourth one, which the other ones have a little, is they perfected the stealth parts.
Yes.
Which I love and it's like at the end of the day, maybe I should just put in Last of Us if this is what I want. I love walking into a big area with enemies, and it's like, well, it's up to you how you want to handle this. You gonna sneak around, take everyone out? You gonna just go guns a-blazing? What are you going to do? Like, I love that.
Yeah.
Like,
and both options,
excited.
In those cases, there's never a situation in where both options don't work.
Right.
Because you could, if you're good enough at what you're doing or you take enough time doing it, you could stealth around, take everybody out without them ever finding you.
Yeah.
Or if you're just like, I don't have time for this, and bap, I mean, that's always a little bit more challenging, especially as you're playing on the higher difficulty levels. But I do love that you can have that option in 4 a lot more than some of the other games.
Yeah, and like 1, I agree, the shooting can get boring. I've only played mostly of 1, so I think I could see it getting more refined. But in 1, you have that big old circle, and that's how it is in all the games. And pretty much if that circle's on the person, you're going to hit them.
Yeah.
What I do love about 4, I think even more so than Last of Us Part 2 even, the gunplay is more realistic on how you shoot, because you can't just like pop out, shoot, and just expect to like, because that's what I do when I play, is I pop out with my pistol and I try to get as many shots off as I can in one area. But in this game, you have the recoil, so if you do that, you're going off site every time.
Yeah.
So you have to adjust within that circle of where you're shooting, and I kind of find that fun and challenging.
Yes. I think, and that's part of, where 4 started to excel in my regard. And I think it's a perfect way to kind of talk into it, and especially you bringing up Last of Us Part 2 and even Last of Us Part 1, because these games are intertwined, I think, more than people realize, because Uncharted 3 came out in 2012. Development of Uncharted 4 began in 2011, and that was still had Hennig and Justin Richmond and being co-directors on this, but they left in 2014 because they had that whole other like projects they wanted to pursue. There was those whole rumors for a while of Hennig going to EA to make these Star Wars games that never got released, which is very disappointing because I think she could have done a lot with them. But we ended up getting back, though, Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley from 2 to come and work on number 4, so kind of reuniting that dream team from 2 a little bit without Hennig, unfortunately. But you still got Druckmann now in the director's chair. who also was writing again with Josh Schur on this game, and you can feel it.
Yeah, the brother stuff is very Last of Us Part 2 in a good way.
They took so much where Last of Us and I think it was like Arkham Asylum really developed that whole approach of like stealth or just bull rush, and you go for it and see if you can make it, right?
And it makes being stuck so much more fun. Like if you're playing on a harder difficulty.
Right.
Like it's not like, oh, I'm repeating and doing the same thing. And it's like, oh, I died. I'm going to try this. Or let me try this.
How could I plan this better?
Yeah. But it really took, I think, took the best parts of what made Uncharted 2 and 3 really good, and then also incorporated all the things that made Last of Us really good. And again, with that whole stealth piece, and finally you got kind of this concoction that ended up in Thief's End. So Uncharted 4, A Thief's End being the name of this game. And so again, we had these creatives come back, so it delayed development for a couple years, but ultimately we got a very tight story, as we started to talk about here, with Nathan being reunited, where the very first part of the game is him going on this mission with his brother Sam from years and years ago. Sam purportedly gets shot and dies in this mission with Rafe Adler and Nadine Ross.
Okay.
Adler. That's another great like action guy.
Right.
Name.
Yeah, it's kind of half my name.
Yeah.
Nadine Ross, the lady, she runs the mercenary group that Asav has hired. So she runs Shoreline. And so that's why she's a thorn in the side. And they don't elaborate on it a whole hell of a lot in the game. But there is history between the Drake brothers and Nadine Ross.
So, I mean, the whole thing follows them going
Tom
to
Adler.
look for the lost treasure of the pirate Henry Avery, right? And I mean, I love me a pirate adventure.
I love me some booty.
Booty.
Gems.
Oh, that's just gold, Fred. It's gold. So suddenly Sam comes back to Nate, who has been retired for a few years. He and Elena living alone, have all his treasures in his attic in this house. And
full circle moment. One of the first things that you get to do in Uncharted 4 is play the first boulder level from Crash Bandicoot 1 in Uncharted 4.
yes, just great.
Which is so good. I remember having that moment and just being giddy as I was playing Uncharted 4 for the first time.
It's really a funny like in-game joke, and you like are like, oh, he's like, oh, this is really tough or something like that. But it's great because then you go on this adventure then with Nate and his brother, and you get some flashbacks in the process of them kind of like thieving around at like homes back when they were in an orphanage with his kids. And you kind of get this whole history of like how they work together, and it really becomes this nice family story, even though Elena seems a little weary of Sam, and like, why is he just suddenly coming back and getting on this? And so they go on this adventure trying to find this lost pirate treasure, trying to outwit, Nadine Ross and Rafe Adler. It's just a great name.
I feel like the brother is like a real like Ed Burns cigarette smoking like guy.
He's got like a Luke Perry type thing.
That's the guy I was about to say. I was like, he's got Luke Perry vibes too.
Yeah, kind of like Luke Perry in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah, yeah. So we get through this. They end up going to Scotland to try and find the start of the trail. They end up in Madagascar. Yeah. I don't know. Let's talk about some of the big moments in this game too, and maybe just kind of walk through that quick, because there's a lot in here. And I just remember you go like the Lost Pirate Cities, and
I think you do the pirate cities. There's a whole lot of puzzles, and one of the things that I think really stood out in this game was the addition of actually controlling some vehicles.
Yes,
like you can drive a Jeep around for a while. Earlier in the game, and then there's a point when there's a series of small little islands, and you can just sort of tootle around in your boat as you're going and exploring some of those islands and all of that stuff. That it added to the mechanics. Fred, you mentioned it earlier with the addition of like the grappling hook mechanics, where they just made the game. It felt more grand. It felt flushed out.
Some more of that swashbuckling feel.
Yes, and and it's that pirate.
Literally, yeah.
It's that pirate adventure, in this last hurrah. And there's some, there. I know there are. I remember there being some underwater moments that were really tense.
Yeah.
Where you swim through a tunnel and you're like, how am I going to make? And you barely make it through that tunnel, before Drake drowns and stuff like that. And I think the set pieces were very interesting as well, like going to somewhere like Scotland, or the as you're getting the first part of the key in the auction house, and planning
fun.
that auction house heist with everybody, with with Sully and Sam and Nate, and you're all like tuxedoed up, and you're trying to like, okay, you got to go here, cut the power, do this, we swipe it and go, but then of course you run into Nadine there, who's obviously running security because Rafe wants to just buy the thing.
Yeah.
And so
That's the bad guy, the guy who knows Sully.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so Rafe, yeah.
I remember they had that little back and forth, like, because when he does the auction, he's like, good, then I don't have to kill you.
Yeah.
Or something like that to Sully.
And yeah, and then ended up finding Libertalia, which is like in this island off of Madagascar.
the lost city of the pirates.
Yeah, and no supernatural at all in this
What about the
game.
penguins of Madagascar? Do they make an appearance?
Fred, if you look closely in the background, so you're driving around the volcano right now in your little Jeep, right? Just take a peek off the coast.
Okay.
I have no idea. No idea.
Kowalski? Analyze.
It does have that, like, I love when you like play a game that like has a familiar mechanic and it almost feels comforting.
Yes.
Which for me was getting the SUV
Yep.
and having the knowledge of, oh, this is like in The Last of Us where you have the horse. You can follow the mission or you can explore and you might find treasures or loot. I just love that.
Right. And it's fun because then, you actually like kind of feel like you are in more of an open world, sort of like, Last of Us 2, I think starts to, which again was the same creative team. It's another podcast, but where you do get that feeling of like, oh, I can go off the beaten track, finding some different stuff like crack a safe or whatever that was left behind. But it's definitely a fun game because then you end up finding like the treasure in a boat. You have this like just a sword fight down with Rafe at the end, and I liked that final boss battle because that was like actually memorable to me, and you had to like really get down the slashes and the fencing movements, and I was like, oh, okay, so they really were like, we're gonna do this right.
And I think a lot of the story beats, not a good amount of the story beats, it feels like they lifted from 4 to develop the movie, because the movie feels very pirate based. And it focuses on the 2 keys, and they do a heist. Like, they basically just said, what if Uncharted 4 had the plot, Uncharted 4's plot happened earlier in Drake's career.
Yep.
Because then it also gives them opportunities to, if
Recast
they make
Sully.
You make him a little older, something. He's John Slattery. Oh, weird.
You know what would be a better choice than Mark Wahlberg? Actual Sully. Because actual Sully has a mustache and looks even more like the Sully from the game. And he's a dang hero.
That's true. Like
he can already fly the planes.
So I tell you, so it's funny that we'll get into the movie here in a moment, but the epilogue of this game though is very interesting because it kind of gets to something that Dan was mentioning earlier. Is this the end of Nathan Drake's story? Because Nathan makes it through the end, and we get a flash forward where we see Nate and Elena's daughter kind of like walking around this island home of theirs, looking at all these old treasures. That's kind of the fallout from the mission. And you realize, like, oh, maybe she's going to be the next adventurer now, as his daughter kind of takes the crown, but maybe they do just end it there.
And if that was the case, if they pushed forward with Nathan and Elena's daughter as a new protagonist for a new series of Uncharted games, I don't think it would be that far-fetched to have Chloe Frazer be like her mentor, her Sully type person. But granted, I don't think Chloe would You know, just with the history and Elena just humanizing it all. I don't think she would.
Right.
But or maybe she goes off adventuring with Uncle Sam. Like, I don't know.
I mean, we are kind of almost like pivoting into coulda, woulda, shoulda with that.
I think it's about time.
It's that time.
I think it's about that time that we start with our coulda, woulda, shoulda. Because, I mean, I think we're going to continue to talk about Uncharted 4 with this because the movie, as we just mentioned, borrows a lot from that story. And I think it's a great story. We saw the visuals really escalate. The PS4 brought out exactly what 3 tried to do, tried to visually elevate the story, and everything felt realer. The mechanics were sharper. Everything felt a little more well-rounded. I felt like everything came together. And, I mean, and you do have kind of a cliffhanger there at the end where you do wonder, so what next? Because then we did have the Lost Legacy that you spoke to a little bit, Dan.
Mm-hmm. No, that game was fun, and you're looking for the treasure. It's an Indian, as in the actual country of India, an Indian artifact called the Horn of Ganesh. And they go into a decent amount of like the Indian pantheon and talking about Shiva and Ganesh and their relationships, where the tusk came from, the cultural significance of it, while also trying to stop Asav, who is leading an insurrection and trying to, because he claims to be of the bloodline of these ancient kings that held the Horn of Ganesh, which just was a symbol of power and wealth. And you're just trying to stop, number one, get the Horn of Ganesh, and then number two, stop him from basically creating an uprising and a civil war in India. Is kind of the overall plot of that one, and it was really fun. It was shorter. It probably only took me about 15 hours to get through versus the 20 to 30 that it would probably take you to get through a regular full scale Uncharted game. But it was still a lot of fun. It was memorable. It was fun playing as Chloe. The final fight was a 2-on-1 fist fight, which you partner with Nadine Ross. She is your partner. So the kind of half of the antagonist and 4 is your partner in the Lost Legacy, because she doesn't have any problems with Chloe. She just hates the Drake brothers, which makes sense based on what you did to her and friends in Uncharted 4. But it's you and Nadine fighting Asav just on a train that is just barreling towards a broken bridge. and on this train, because you've diverted it, he's traded the Horn of Ganesh for basically, it's not a nuke, but it is a huge bomb.
Yeah.
And it's on this train, and the train was basically set to roll right into a major Indian city and blow up, which would have incited the Civil War. And so you derail the train onto it, or divert it, and you get into a fist fight, and you have to run off this train as it's now careening off this bridge.
Oh, man.
Asav gets trapped under the bomb. It's great. And again, in key with the rest of the games, where the villain ends up usually offing themselves. I mean, in this one, we punched him so hard he fell under a bomb and got trapped.
That's funny.
But it was a really fun fight. Because it wasn't a shootout. It was just he is better at fighting than both of you, and you have to team up to try to make it happen. It's so good.
Yeah, and so this came out a year after Uncharted 4, and we had one of the designers from 4 stick around, Kurt Marginal, with another player come in here named Sean Escage, who directed this game, who also helped write it with Josh Schur. And, you definitely have to think about, was this, really kind of the start of something new? If Uncharted's going to keep going, are these the types of stories we're going to want to see? Or is there going to be just a complete pivot to Uncharted's going to pick up on Nate's legacy? And, you do have a Chloe Fraser, who's maybe the one holdover, is she's going to be the new Sully or whatever. And I think that's the question, is what would you guys want to see going forward in this franchise if, what could they do?
I think they should do kind of like an Assassin's Creed thing and tell like a more back in the day story where you could have like a pirate or something on an adventure and have these game mechanics, but you have like a blunderbuss or whatever, like old school. You said there's some swordplay in the fourth one. Maybe there's more of that, but it's that Uncharted. It's an Uncharted game, but new characters, different time zone, different time period.
Yeah. I mean, with that being said, wouldn't it be kind of fun to play as Sir Francis Drake and go and be like, oh, yeah, no, I got to leave. And kind of see where that, to an extent came from, perhaps. I think I was elaborating on it a little bit earlier. I wouldn't be mad seeing, Nate and Elena's daughter carry the torch. But I think where Lost Legacy left off, I think they have more stories to tell with Chloe and Nadine partnering, and because they're great. And at some point, Sam Drake shows up a little bit later in the game, which causes some, that it's that classic like we're partners. Oh, late game betrayal. Okay, fine, reluctantly working together. After this sort of betrayal kind of motif. Like, it's a common motif. Like, that's a thing that happens. But seeing adventures between the three of them as they go off and do stuff, again, still focusing on, like, I think Sam is an interesting side character. I don't really feel like I have a desire to play as Sam.
Yeah.
I would love to continue playing as Chloe or Nadine and doing adventures as them, because I think they are both really well thought out characters. They were fun. Their dialogue between each other, like, I think they did just like, that's one thing that we didn't touch on at all yet, is just as you're playing the game, really, like the actual just dialogue between Drake and Sully or Drake and Elena as they are just walking around in between the huge action sequences is so good.
Yeah.
It really is. And Nadine and Chloe capture a lot about that. And they also talk about Drake a little bit, and they make fun of him. And It was so funny.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is the window into the future, though, too, of kind of seeing, like, what are these people's relationships to each other? If you do have Sam, I don't know you want to play as him necessarily, but maybe he is more in like a Sully type role, and you get to learn more about like his history kind of via maybe like Nate's daughter, or you get to learn more about it through Chloe Fraser, and more about Chloe herself and her relationship with some of these other people. Even like her and Sully seem like they had kind of a history too. And so you have like all these different relationships you can explore that kind of build out the Uncharted story without necessarily being like Nate needs to be the central figure in this, right?
I like the idea of doing like the Drake thing, like maybe during his Degrassi years or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool too. Something like that first adventure, that first real big adventure. So long as there's DLC to reskin the Sully we know and love as Mark Wahlberg, I'm in.
I mean, I can't gloss past that. I mean, were Jay and Silent Bob going to be part of the Drake Degrassi years? So I can't believe they're in that show. But yeah, I think we do need to talk a little about the movie. But one thing I did want to get into a little bit too first, something they maybe would have done different. I kind of want to pull the pin back out on us talking about some of like the supernatural elements in these games. Because something that 4, I thought, does very well is tell a complete story that you're very invested in with all the same Uncharted feel and beats without feeling the need to reach for this weird at the end of like, there are these monsters or these mutants or anything that you have to suddenly shoot. And I was like, so you could have done this all along. And it kind of felt like maybe Indiana Jones sort of set them up a little bit to be like, well, because they did it, we can get away with this, and you people can just shoot him. And like,
that's what I think it is. I just think that they're like, well, we don't have to do the Indiana Jones thing because we're an established franchise.
And
now.
I think that might have been part of it because how when you're looking at the story beats for one, and if that if the zombie things, if the Nazi zombies weren't a thing in it, how do you reconcile the conflict with Roman and Navarro other than what is like, okay, yeah, they're getting away with this thing. They got the statue. They beat us. It's like, gee, dang. But now, like, knowing what it did gave Drake that reason to go, well, now I have to be a hero. Because if that got out,
Yeah.
it would spell disaster.
But I think that's something that the third one actually does kind of well, where it's sort of like, it's almost a bait and switch. And that's one part of the game I did like, where it's like the supernatural element is not that there is something supernatural. It's that there's something believable about like tainted water that could cause damage if it got out. Right?
Right.
And I wonder if maybe there was some kind of element you could have done with the El Dorado statue in the first one, where it is more like, oh, this thing is like cursed in a way that like maybe it's like radioactive, like, or something like that, where like you see people just kind of like die as they get close to it because the thing is just like you can't really get near it, which I mean is the effect of what we see there
to an extent.
Yeah,
but
I mean, and I think it still works in that regard. I do wonder if maybe there would have been a way to be like, even like the end of Last Crusade, it's like the Grail, like, yeah, it gives you long lasting life, like, it's all this, but you can't ever pass the seal, otherwise the temple collapses on itself and you're never going to take it out. Like, and I always appreciated that ending because I was like, right, it's more about the journey of finding this and finding, your faith and finding this reconciliation, rather than be like, we're going to get the Grail and like get all this and like store it away in a warehouse like the Lost Ark. It's like, here I'm jumping between two fishes, but it's the point I'm trying to make. It's like you could come up with something that.
But I think I agree with what Fred is saying too, that they took a risk with Uncharted 1, and they wanted to go with a formula that has worked. And I think adding that supernatural element to the end of it added a little bit more of this mystery and grandeur to this adventure that I think made it a little bit more memorable. And I think they did the same thing with 2, but after 1 and 2 were done, with them moving on to The Last of Us and Uncharted 3, like Fred said, they became a little bit more established, where they could tell a completely, and they had the experiment of being able to tell a story that is completely grounded in humanity.
Yep.
And it working. And I wonder if there was a concern, back in 2006, 2005, 2006, when they were developing the first Uncharted, is a story that is completely grounded in humanity. Is that going to work?
Is it marketable? Yeah.
Is it marketable? Is that going to work? Granted, none of the marketing focused on Nazi zombies. Like, so, but like, is that going to work at that point in time?
Yeah.
And I think as gamers have continued to evolve and grow, and storytelling continues to change, I think it's refreshing to see something that is so grounded in reality. And I think that's why 4 feels so different, than 1 and 2, and even 3, as they are starting to sort of steer away from the true supernatural climax to the game. That maybe they did find their footing, they're established, they can tell a human story with human consequences, and make it feel big and important. And I think that within is the difference.
For sure. And I think it's something that maybe made the movie work in a way, is that they modeled a lot after Uncharted 4. So let's maybe pop into that, since we've been talking about it. Because I do think there are things, though, I would have maybe done differently, or maybe they should have done differently.
With the movie?
Because, I mean, it's interesting that the movie, now we get into it, it's directed by Ruben Fleischer, starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg kind of inexplicably as Sully. Tom Holland is a very young-looking Nathan Drake.
The timeline on that movie, where it's supposed to be happening in their relationship, doesn't exactly make sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, they're obviously telling almost like a parallel universe story to the games. It's not supposed to necessarily follow it, and obviously they tease out the first story kind of coming in at the end of the first movie, but...
Which, I mean, if they do actually make a Drake's Fortune, and not a beat for beat necessarily, but if they do their take, I'm opening night, baby. I'm gonna go see it. Like,
so what were you guys' thoughts on the movie itself?
I thought it was a fine Gentleman 6 of an action movie that honestly, like, I don't know why I'm so hung up on it, but like the Mark Wahlberg thing of it all really bothered me, because as a person who even was watching Uncharted from the outside, watching people enjoy, the thing that I latched on to, I love a mustachioed, cigar chomping, Hawaiian shirt wearing guy. Like, I love that vibe. And like, I think we've seen that kind of character before, so it's kind of that thing where it's like, oh, we get that. And just to cast him as Mark Wahlberg, like, I don't know. It bothered me enough to affect it for me.
In that same boat, like, there's, I think, a bunch of people that could have made a better Sully. One of the first people that comes to mind, just because he sort of got the hair and kind of honestly, kind of similar face, Ron Perlman. I think could have been like a really good. Ron Perlman could have made a great Sully. Hell, dye Nick Offerman's hair, and because he can grow a hell of a mustache, and he's got good acting chops. He's popular everywhere right now. David Harbour. Yeah, David Harbour could have made a fantastic Sully.
I also thought put it on the shelf for like 10 more years, but then have, I think John Hamm would be a good Sully. You give him like the facial hair.
Yes, I was talking about John Slattery, yeah.
But I hated the casting choice when I heard about it.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would when I watched the movie. I didn't think he did a terrible job. Tom Holland didn't do a terrible job. It felt very run-of-the-mill action movie, but it did capture some of the grandeur of the Uncharted series, like when they used the cargo helicopters to pull this huge old ship out of and they're doing a fight on a ship that's just getting helicoptered. Like, that was cool. It was cool as hell. There's no way it's fun. I think they did a fun job lifting the cargo plane sequence. Yeah. I went into it thinking, I'm like, yep, this is a video game movie.
Yeah. Right.
It ain't gonna be good, but it's a video game movie about a franchise that I love. I'm going into it with an open mind, and if I enjoy myself as I watch this movie, that's a win. And I truly did enjoy myself. It was a fun flick. Mark Wahlberg was not. It's very fun to make fun of him. He was not nearly as bad as I thought it could have been.
Yeah, I think I agree with that too. That I think they did fine with all of it. The thing that always kind of hung me up, and I think this even got kind of called out too at the time, is sort of like, it's weird to have Tom Holland, who is not bad in the movie by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I think he does fine. But I think the problem with Tom Holland specifically is that you have him in another major franchise playing a high schooler, and we're supposed to believe in this movie that he is a 27-year-old, which he actually is. He's a 26 or 27-year-old guy now. But the fact that we see him playing 18-year-old Peter Parker, in all these other major movies that everyone's seen, and then you come in Uncharted and you're like, okay, so he's supposed to be 10 years older in this? Like, he doesn't look like it. Like, because it's just in your brain. It's like, no, he
has a real baby face. Yeah. That's the problem. Like, you can't. It's not like they do something to de-age him,
right?
For the Spider-Man movies. He looks like a believable teenager,
right?
He does not have the face or the grit of someone who is an average guy in his late 20s going on this adventure. Like, that's why I think that Uncharted fan film with that they actually got Nathan Fillion to play Drake. Like, holy shit, what a great moment. Like, that kind of solidified, like, yeah, he would be great. Make this movie 20 years ago, Brendan Fraser, holy shit. Well, but that's too close to The Mummy.
He's
in
fine. I was gonna say he's in the 1999 modern classic The Mummy.
That's fine. But
what about him just in his whale makeup as Drake?
There is a cosmetic that you can unlock in most of the Uncharted games called Donut Drake, and it's just they just make him super fat. And there is an achievement in most of the games that if you start a new game with the Donut Drake costume selected and you complete it on speedrun mode, there's an achievement for like doing the speedrun as Donut Drake. Honestly, I want to say it was like the achievement was called the Fat and the Furious or something. I might be wrong on that, but it was a pun. But the Tom Holland, it was fine. I didn't believe his age. He was not as believable as I think he could have been for the age that he was supposed to be in this story. It didn't really make a lot of sense. Mark Wahlberg was a confusing choice. The movie wasn't terrible. I did like the Nolan North cameo.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So I guess my problem with that whole thing is neither actor was cast because they were right for the role. They were cast because of their star power, which already dings my perception of the movie. I do think Ruben Fleischer he's not like an amazing director, but I think he makes his movies pop. Like I think Venom, Zombieland, even that he did like kind of a L.A. noir style movie.
Oh, Gangster Squad, yeah.
Gangster Squad. All those movies look really good and pop, and I think he has the aesthetic of Uncharted down, which was kind of the disappointing thing, was that the care put into the casting was non-existent and just transparently, these are stars who are big.
Other than Banderas, I thought he played.
Banderas is great.
He's just perfect.
When's he bad?
Yeah. Plus, yeah. But I also thought even the girl that got to be the villain that kind of takes out Banderas was good too.
Well, the one guy that I always heard for Nathan Drake that everyone wanted was the Angel guy.
Oh, David Boreanaz.
Yeah.
Yeah. He but again, maybe like 20 years ago.
He's also kind of like boring Nathan Fillion too.
Yeah, and Nathan Fillion was also a Whedonverse. I think if you're going to get a Whedonverse alone, it's going to be Nathan Fillion. So let's jump into our power rankings here as we kind of reach the end of this episode, guys. Because I think now that we've talked through all the games and gotten into a little bit of that, I mean, the movie was what it was. We'll probably have more to say if we get into it, like maybe a movie-focused episode ever, if they keep making them. But I don't know. I don't think there's much else to say really about it. It's really about the games, and I want us to power rank your games. Let's go 1 through 4.
Yeah.
And get the main installments. So, Dan, kick us off.
I can pretty confidently say 2, 1, 4, 3.
Okay.
Is my my order.
All right. Any reason you picked one over another that...
I think, so I think 3 is the least memorable of the original. I feel it feels like an original 3 and then like a reboot to an extent with 1, 2, 3, and then 4. They all came out, relatively speaking, in a normal sequence for games coming out like that. Mm-hmm. But I think, Uncharted 4 takes place like 10 years later or whatever it is, or significantly later. And then maybe with the jump to the next gen, it just felt like its own thing. But even still, like 4, I think I've only played it through once. I enjoyed it.
Again?
Like, well, no, talking about this, I'm like, fuck, I gotta go and I gotta play everything.
Yeah.
Like that is just how I feel. I'm like,
you gotta beat my headshot score.
I gotta play them all again now. Like, I'm just so excited. Just talking about it made me excited about all of them again. Even still with my one experience with 4, I do remember loving it and being absolutely engrossed with it, but it's still
got a love for the classics.
I love the 2 is just by far my favorite. 1 is so memorable to me just because of the moment of getting it and the demo and the hype around it. I think 4 was fantastic, and if I played through it again, that might change my mind on it, and it might be higher on the list. But overall, I think I was the least in love with Uncharted 3.
Sure.
And it's not like we've got to rank 20 of these movies, and it's a huge argument of what's in your top 10, and how could you put, Uncharted 23 that low on your list, Maybe someday it'll be that, but I don't think it will.
They're all pretty close, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I confidently play my list, but it's not like there are, dramatic jumps between. It's not like 2 is so much better than the rest of them, and none would ever be able to eclipse it. And 3 is, it's not like 3 is Temple of Doom, or Crystal Skull. That's not the case.
Yeah. I do like Temple of Doom,
and I do like Crystal Skull.
Oh,
I like all 4. All 4 are great.
We'll put a pin in that for Indiana Jones episode. We brought it up a little bit. Now I'm itching, but that'll be it for another day. Fred, so I know you didn't play through all of them, but how do you feel, I think especially about 4 and 1?
I think it's unfair for me because I say anytime you approach, I was combined to words. You approach a franchise when you approach.
When you
franchise. It's hard when you're going back and playing the older games because you're not playing them currently.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me not to rank 4 over 1, 2, or 3 because I'm not playing them in the moment, and I do have those nowadays goggles. I do struggle. Like, I enjoy playing old games. I do it a lot, but I definitely have trouble playing, comparing them.
Yes.
Because 4 does more the things that I like in a game. I wish they had a gun mechanic for upgrading your weapons. That is the one thing I want in these games.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah,
Not even anything big, just something.
Kind of like how you do in Last of Us. I mentioned a lot.
I know. But yeah, so let's say TBD for me, because I will be finishing these games. Maybe next time we have Dan on, I'll have my ranking.
Whatever Naughty Dog game we do next. I kind of suspect we might have one already, but...
Yeah, give me some time to play through those games.
Yeah, or we'll pin you for Jack and Daxter.
No, man.
I might just be the Naughty Dog franchise guy.
Uncharted 2.
1 10-hour super episode where we break down every Naughty Dog game.
Oh my goodness. Well, we've already done 2 legs of them. So.
Yeah, and we'll do it again too.
Yeah.
There's a new Crash game that got announced.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Revisit. I will. I'll echo your thoughts though, Fred, because I think having played them all in order all at once, it definitely, I think it gave good perspective of, okay, here's what each story has to offer. Here's how each of them plays through. But it is hard to go, I think what it was, 2019, 2020. No, it wasn't 2020, it was 2019. But to play through all of those at that point and then be like, well, obviously 4 feels the best because it's the best graphics. In my opinion, 4 is my favorite. I loved how grounded it was. I loved the brother story. I loved the pirate treasure. I will go to Pirates Cove, mini golf, and read all the facts before I putt. And so I think that hit all the boxes for me. But 2 is great. That would be my second one. I think the story is so wonderful, so memorable. The songs are great that are associated. It's not even in the game. I think I'll put 3 though, number 3, and it's very close between 3 and 1 for me. Only because I did like how 3 kind of dived into some of that history, but 1 is very close. I just the mutant thing in that really just still kind of gives me the willies, and I don't know. I don't like to want to revisit it, but it was a very cool launch off. The whole franchise is very cool, and if you guys have never played it, whoever's listening, and you need a good franchise to jump into, hopefully this gave you a lot of reasons to find it. So now we're at the end of our episode here. Anything that you gentlemen would like to plug? Dan, we can start with you.
Tell us what you'd like to plug.
I guess come visit me when I'm bartending. New Barons Brewing Cooperative. If you like franchises, you'll like our little franchise of beers and the stories. That's so dumb. That was such a dumb way to phrase that. But no, people like stories. The beers that we have tell stories, and they're named after people and stories. And we've got a nice little community here. So come visit us. Otherwise, I don't have anything else that I'm working on right now.
Is that like Lincoln and what's the?
It is on First and Beecher in the
First
old
and
Lincoln
Beecher.
warehouse.
And I just want to say, although I love New Barons the best, you can really spend an afternoon in that area because
Oh, yeah.
there's another brewery
There's
and
two-
a distillery.
There's 2 other breweries.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a whole night out in one building. Come visit me. It'll be a good time.
Excellent. Fred, what do you got?
I will be with the Tina team on the 13th. If this gets dropped in time, come see me at the Interchange Theater. Go.
That is wonderful. I'll also plug a show that I am in. I'll be in Sketch 22 on Saturday night, January 21st at 7 o'clock. It's going to be at Comedy Sports in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Farina Arena. Tickets are available at schmitzandgiggles.org. So go ahead and take a look there if you want to pick up tickets. Very fun show. And stay tuned for next time, where we are going to be diving into another food tournament.
You pulling my leg?
No, Fred, I'm just giving you a wing. That's right. This year we are doing the Great Buffalo Wing Tournament.
Yes.
So please join us for that, and we'll see you next time. If you are enjoying what you're listening to, please ask that you rate and review this show. Any of your feedback is appreciated. Please give us 5 stars. We would appreciate that as well. If you'd like to support the show, you can also donate to us at buymeacoffee.com/SOTF. We also are on all your podcasting services, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to us currently, as a matter of fact. We'll see you next time.